Hello, Panawat. Okay, everybody, we're having some people joining rapidly here, so let's wait another few moments while everyone joins us. Hello, everybody. For those of you joining us, we're just standing by another moment to give participants a chance to climb on board. All right, well, it's 16:02, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. So first of all, welcome everybody to all of you who are enjoying Data and Digital Day of the UN 2.0 2025. My name is Mark McCarthy, and I work here in UN Human Rights with the Innovation and Analytics Hub. And I have the pleasure of moderating this discussion today. As you can see, the title is the Ideas Impact Ecosystems, the UN Human Rights Innovation Journey. And so really what we're going to do is have a conversation with some of our experts here associated with the hub, and as well as a colleague from joining us from Ukraine, to hear about how we have tried to bring to life the High Commissioner's vision. So let me talk a little bit about the session today. So today we're going to try to explore this journey of the UN Human Rights Innovation Analytics Hub. This initiative was born from the High Commissioner's vision to try and bring about UN 2.0 to our human rights work. This bold idea, this hub of innovation and analytics, has evolved into a dynamic ecosystem, advancing data, digital transformation, and innovation. The reason we do this is to strengthen human rights work, not only within our organization, but across the UN system. So we hope that this session is going to provide insights for those who would like to engage in similar efforts across their own organizations and to further UN human rights efforts to protect human rights around the world. I'm going to provide a little bit of context of when this hub started. So in 2023, we celebrated the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was clear then that after 75 years, human rights remain critically important, but were very much at risk. The anniversary taught us that the hard-won advancements and achievements that we've made in human rights remain fragile and at serious risk, threatened by a series of global challenges. In this context, in late 2023, the High Commissioner endorsed the creation of a hub for innovation and data insights. I'm going to quote the High Commissioner. The idea was to inject new data, technology, and innovative tools and thinking into OHCHR. He saw this transformation as an opportunity and a necessity. He saw that the human rights system must resolve to do things differently, including harnessing the power of data, innovation, foresight, and behavioral science to promote and protect human rights globally. It sounds a lot like the UN 2.0, doesn't it? So that was the vision. And so today we're going to talk about how we bring that vision to life. We have our guests today are going to be George Hodge, who is the head of the Data Solutions Unit here in the Hub. Luzal Vaidia, he is the head of the Digital Systems Unit. And we also have Ole Solvang. He's going to join us from the Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine to give us that field perspective. And finally, Amy Shelver, who is here with us in the Innovation and Analytics Hub, providing a lot of the work on partnerships and looking externally to try and make sure that we have the greatest impact that we possibly can. With that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and start asking some questions. I would like to ask everyone to please remain muted during the presentations and the conversations. We're happy to take all of the questions that you can come up with in chat. We'd love to answer them, and we definitely encourage you to please share your questions. Okay, let's go to George. George, you've been around. You were here before the Hub's creation. You've been around for this magical transition. Do me a favor. Let's take us back to the beginning and tell me about how did all of this come together in this vision? How did we put that vision to action?
Thanks a lot, Mark. I mean, as you've highlighted, the High Commissioner was a key element in this. I mean, Volker Turk, in his previous role in the Executive Office of the Secretary General, was the intellectual force behind the quintet of change, focusing on data, digital innovation, foresight, and behavioral science, and a key driver in the Executive Office of the Secretary General of the UN 2.0 agenda. And he brought a lot of this vision and ambition and energy with him when he took up the post of High Commissioner for Human Rights. And that's not to say that there was nothing in place when he arrived. There were some capabilities in place. If you think about the digital and data revolution that's been unfolding around us for several decades now, the institution had started to respond to the opportunities of that revolution as well as the risks. Also, think back to the turn of the decade and the UN data strategy that also signaled some clear direction, which has flowed into the UN 2.0 reform agenda. So OHCHR had some teams in place. There were information management, data and digital teams in some of the divisions. We had a statistics team, we had an early warning analytics team, an early warning analysis unit. We also had a digital transformation project management office coming into being around the time these reforms started to gain pace, as well as information management officers embedded in our emergency response teams across our network of field presences. Now, these teams were making progress, within their areas of responsibility. It was some incremental, progress. We're creating impact in the areas under their purview, but none of them were really responsible for addressing this or serving these capabilities in a joined up way for the entire institution. So thinking of a hub and spoke model, we had the spokes, but we didn't have a hub that brought all of it together. And so once it was created, it was immediately clear that it flipped the entire incentive structure regarding the quintet transformation agenda. And that's really enabled us to bring those capabilities together, think in a cross-cutting, cross-organization way, and work with our colleagues to create, as part of that broader reform and agenda, an institution fit for the future.
All right. Yeah, thanks very much. So we've now got this hub bringing together these pieces that were there. How did you go about understanding what the requirements were so we were best suited for success across UN human rights for starters?
Yeah, great question. I mean, of course, a huge engagement campaign centered on the collection of use cases. And you might be asking, well, why use cases? I mean, a lot of the areas of the quintet of change of the UN 2.0 agenda, these are fundamentally capabilities that should serve the mission, the different missions, the different mandates of the UN system organizations. And so, collecting use cases helps to ensure that the capabilities are applied directly to advancing the mandate. So we conducted a series of workshops and online consultations. In total, we engaged over 900 colleagues. And for context, that's about almost half our staff body. Across that, we collected 400 use cases. So demand was off the chart. It was a really pleasant surprise to see that demand flow in for a joined up strategic approach to this area of work. And then what we did is, of course, 400 use cases, you can't boil the ocean. You need to rationalize that, you need to distill it. So we analyzed them across 3 areas: impact, effort, and enablers. So first was impact on the mission. The suggested use case, is it going to really transform or accelerate our ability to document human rights violations, to protect victims, to prevent escalation, to advocate for justice, or to support national accountability processes? Then on the second pillar, we looked at effort. Do we have the capability from existing resources to address this use case, or do we need to think more creatively about partnerships and resources in order to address it? And then finally, we looked at the different types of enablers that we might need. We looked in a cross-cutting way at all of these cases, thinking, okay, where do we see commonality in AI capabilities? Where do we see common data sets being referenced? Where do we see duplicate use cases that could be consolidated? Where do we see the use of low-code or no-code solutions that might help? And so we took all of that analysis and clustered it into 14 Lighthouse projects, got the seal of approval from our senior executive team, and that's been the basis for the work of the Innovation Analytics Hub since then.
All right, thank you. I actually have a whole lot of questions, but I think it's my responsibility to keep us moving forward. And I think, yeah, I'll save my questions for later, but I'd like to now move on to take a look at, okay, so now we know where we came from and how we responded to the need and set forth our goals and ambition. So now I'd love for Luzal to help us understand where are we now. And so Luzal, building on George's insights that he just shared on the origins, can you take us through sort of the key hub projects that are now addressing human rights needs and in what are the impact areas?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And that's a great question. And thanks, George. Also, hello to everyone who's attending right now. Very pleased to be here. Let me share my screen and perhaps put some visual twist and element to this in answering what you just said. Yeah. So perhaps it's also useful to reiterate what George just mentioned. The Hub's current work focuses on key lighthouse projects. These are aimed at to deliver the 8C's vision of being a trusted partner and leading authority in advancing human rights and developing 2.0 capabilities such as data and digital for enhancing not just systems, but people, processes, skills, and the underlying culture to achieve and sustain this goal, right? As you can see on this slide, so as George mentioned earlier, we use the use case mapping framework to guide our journey and prioritize efforts so that all the investments across these projects are more impact-based, demand-driven, or led, and representative sort of the cross-cutting needs in the human rights pillar at HQ, at regional levels, and at the field level, basically. So again, to come back to your question, so our projects fall across 4 key areas: data, tech, foresight, and stats. But the common denominator is that each are designed ultimately to strengthen the human rights ecosystem. Now, our approach in terms of how we look at problems, how we design solutions is that we want to make sure that people or communities that we're impacting are at the center, and also through enablers such as partnerships, through smarter systems aligned to the 8C's vision, and also the predecessors such as the SG's data strategy and the UN 2.0 quintet of change. And as George and others highlighted, the focus here is on driving efficiency, strengthening data governance, and scaling the value of data with a perhaps more connected standards-based operating model and doing things a little bit differently than before. So one of our, so as you can see, these are some of the scaling factors or the projects where we measure, serve, monitor, transform. But let me give you some concrete examples in terms of where we are with regards to some of our key projects, basically. So in our work, one of the key areas is SDG 16 on measuring and reporting on official indicators. And for colleagues who might not be familiar, it's related to peace, justice, and strong institutions. And some colleagues who might have heard the 8C say before, the SDG 16 is the linchpin of the 2030 agenda, because freedom is perhaps both the goal and the driver of development, and neglect it, and even spectacular gains in health or poverty reduction or other areas could crumble under the weight of shrinking civic space, violent conflict, or corruption, right? So that also impacts sort of how we're approaching things or focusing on our initiatives so that we strengthen SDG 16 and human rights and sort of how we measure that at scale. But as it stands, the wide data gaps to make reliable cross-country analysis or in-country analysis and to formulate sound policy decisions is very difficult. And it's also compounding with the traditional manual methods, which can no longer keep up with today's more complex, rapidly shifting political and social realities, basically. So as custodians of the 4 official SDG 16 indicators, the stats team in our hub now uses more advanced statistical approaches, including AI, to generate more reliable recording of civilian casualties in conflict and to map incidents of attacks against human rights defenders at scale. So this would be one of the impact areas that we're working on. Now, turning the page in terms of more unstructured data reports and sort of our day-to-day bread and butter, the project is Libra AI. So here we're actively experimenting with generative AI, coupled with a technique called retrieval augmented generation and something called reinforcement learning to unlock human rights knowledge stored in about 5 to 10 million documents and served through a chat-based multilingual interface. So the idea is to empower the global community that might be diverse user groups and user journeys, from researchers to businesses and investors with relevant, accurate, and more actionable insights based on high-quality human rights data that we sit on. Now, just to give you an example quickly, Maria is a 25-year-old journalist from South America. She's covering protests about indigenous land rights. She needs authoritative guidance and wants to know about freedom of press in her local setting. And also what to do if she's faced with detention and which National Human Rights Institute are there for guidance, right? So could be similar elsewhere in the world, who's Ahmed is a factory worker. He wants to know a little bit more about labor rights and who should he contact in terms of more pragmatic approaches to deal with it. So these are some of the more practical on-the-ground use cases we're looking at in terms of user journeys. Now, Libra, quickly, is also part of our larger plan and vision to unlock human rights data at scale through a data as a service model. So working currently with more partners in the tech and private sector like Microsoft. We're also trying to deliver the world's first authoritative open human rights data service so that diverse stakeholders, specifically external, from diplomats to donor agency analysts, can sort of get the value add of the things that we're doing and gain actionable insights from sort of the assets that we're collecting on the ground. So maybe quickly turning the page beyond, maybe I think I skipped this one. So in terms of monitoring, which is also a big mandate of ours, so this has always been a challenge considering the global nature of things right now. So in terms of tracking and reporting human rights issues globally, so one of our core projects is the Civic Space Pulse. Here also we're working with partners like Data Miner and others who provide us a fire hose of more than, I would say, 100,000 data sources globally. And then how do we employ machine learning models and workflows to detect leads, patterns, and early warning signs across the high velocity and high volume data, right? So now beyond the early sort of monitoring action, it sort of also goes in hand in easing the workload of our stretched field teams in identifying leads, specifically in crisis situations where there are security access constraints, but also having perhaps the ability to integrate diverse data sources for a full picture and complement traditional approaches, basically. How are we doing on time? Maybe I can skip a few.
You just keep moving along. Keep moving
Right.
along.
All right, maybe perhaps I'll cut it short, but the other key area would be the human rights mechanisms. And perhaps if there are colleagues in the audience who may not be aware, this is the forum which serves as the UN's primary intergovernmental body dedicated to addressing issues like racial discrimination, discrimination against women, torture, child rights, and so on, basically. Here, also mandated actions, more importantly, are taken with member states. So in the hub now, we are addressing and looking at some of the challenges in this forum using more modern approaches in data and digital to sort of transform it to be a more agile and responsive body. This includes improving the efficiency of business processes like text-heavy complaints processing, expanding the accessibility, and also unlocking things like real-time stakeholder tracking and so on. And perhaps a more concrete example that's very recent in the mechanisms is the mapping of the council mandates. So we're currently employing more modern approaches for reference to process over 12,000 official documents and analyze perhaps over 3,000 resolutions, decisions, and precedent statements in an effort so that we can identify volumes, patterns, and opportunities to improve efficiency across mandated activities, right? Now, this is also very timely considering, as you know, the UN is navigating extraordinary fiscal constraint environment, and we sort of need to prioritize strategically what we do, the amount we work with, and so on. Let me just stop there. So over to you. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Nizal. I am very confident there are probably many questions, and I'm sure you have you already know a lot of the questions that will come your way, and we'll try to entertain those a little bit later. In order to keep us moving forward, we're going to talk to Ole Salvan, and please forgive me if I pronounce your name incorrectly, Ole. Ole is the deputy head of mission for the Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine. And it's our real privilege to have Ole here because he can give us some insights on what this data and digital transformation really looks like and feels like practically on the ground in the field. And so, Ole, welcome. And let me just ask you this more direct question and say, your experience in the mission, it gives us some perspective. How have information management systems and data tools directly impacted the actual human rights monitoring and response that you're undertaking on the ground in a very complex environment?
Well, thank you for that introduction, Mark, and thank you for having me on this conference. The Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, HRMMU as we call ourselves, has traditionally been a very sort of data-driven mission. We have put a lot of emphasis on various kinds of quantifiable measures to track trends and patterns. And I think with the, with the sort of full-scale invasion in 2022, that became even more relevant here. But it also meant that my colleagues were completely overwhelmed by the sheer number of violations and incidents, et cetera, that we needed to track. And I think so to be able to cope with that, back in 2022, colleagues started using and coming up with various solutions that were good as kind of gap fillers, but also had quite a lot of shortcomings. Using Excel spreadsheets is a very, very quick fix, can be, but it really limits your analysis down the line and how you share that information. So we were faced with various challenges. The amount of incidents that we were trying and had an ambition to track and document and verify. We discovered that open source information was becoming increasingly valuable for us in terms of analyzing incidents, but we had ended up with siloed systems. On top of that, we were also facing different reporting mechanisms. Luzal mentioned the SDG 16 that we were reporting against. We were reporting against children in armed conflict mechanisms. We had our own systems, and not all of these had the same standards and definitions, etc. So quite complicated. Now, with what we've been able to do with the support of the hub is to start addressing on a much more systematic level those challenges and putting in place a system that helps us manage that kind of information. And I want to use one example here, and that is one of our main, one important task for us is to track this impact on civilians from hostilities. And that can be civilian casualties, killed or injured. It can be damage to infrastructure, hospitals and schools, or impact on energy infrastructure, for example. And up until, we had the support of the hub to develop this system, we had different portfolio holders sitting with their different Excel spreadsheets tracking these things. What we have done and what we've been able to do is develop one integrated system where all these different elements are connected. It's based around different incidents. A single incident can have casualties, it can have infrastructure damage, etc. It is lightweight enough to be resource efficient. So in some ways, the system we've been able to develop functions as a spreadsheet, but it's complicated enough and allows sort of relationships, building relationships between different categories and allows for much deeper analysis. So what has this done? This has really allowed us to collaborate within the team. So you have different people working, in a much more collaborative way on documenting various aspects of these incidents. It has allowed us to have a real-time overview of what is happening now. And let's see now if I can share my screen, if that is possible. And it would be unfortunate if on these very text-centered conference, I'm not able to do so, but I think you can see my screen now. And it has allowed us to basically create this dashboard with where at the click of a button, I can tease out all the numbers that I need in terms of casualties. I can have a look at where these casualties were occurred. I can very easily see what kind of weapons caused the most casualties. I can also, what is very helpful, map these out, and I can see where they are happening, where you have the most concentration of the casualties, for example, along the front line here, but also in some major cities around the country. And we also have this, that also allows us to do this with a heat map. So one part of this is the analysis. We're able to do much deeper, well, first of all, as I mentioned, have a real-time overview of the trends and patterns, but also to go much deeper and do deeper analysis. And this has allowed us to identify trends earlier. So what is it exactly that is causing the highest civilian casualties? What are the biggest problems in terms of weapon systems, for example? And to catch those trends and patterns in a much earlier and with much more confidence, because we have the data to back it up, not just kind of anecdotes. What it has also allowed us to do is to make that analysis public and share that in a better way. So before, we would just put out the monthly numbers of casualties, for example. Now we include in the monthly updates a significant analysis of what has been happening. And it has also allowed us on some special projects, for example, to integrate this in the presentations that we are doing. So here, if you can see, this is a project that we did on Ukraine's energy infrastructure and the impact that attacks on that infrastructure has had. And here we were able to, well, this is also another example of what we've been doing with the hub to improve the way that we present the data and make it more accessible. But for example, we were able to, because we now had better data, to really break down, as you can see here, the attacks in a number of waves and which regions were most affected, and to do a deeper analysis on that. So real-time overview, deeper analysis, better presentation. But it is also important here to mention institutional memory and data security, because now we have everything in one place, and there is a record of all the information that we have used as a foundation to draw our conclusion. Let me make one more point before I hand it back to you here, and that is on automation. And this is an area where I think we've started, but where we can, do more. But for example, in a different project that we have been running, the occupying authorities in occupied territories of Ukraine have started a process where they are de facto confiscating a lot of personal and private property, apartments, etc. We're talking about thousands of apartments that are being sort of at risk of being confiscated. We wanted to track this. And so we have been working on scripts that allows us to, well, let me also say, all of these apartments are then being published in various social media channels and on the web. So we've been working on scripts that would scrape this information automatically, and then automatically assigned GPS locations to those addresses, and so that we would be able to map this automatically and get a better sense of where is this happening, where is this most acute, is it the most fancy neighborhoods that are most subject to these private property confiscations, etc. But this is an area where I think we have even greater potential to improve. Let me pause there or stop there because I'm not sure how I'm doing on time.
You're fine. You did great. You did great. So listen, wow. So I have many questions, but I think what I'll do is first, I just wanted to point out that I love the example you used as a practical way to leverage the technology to give you a broader reach of coverage that you would have really struggled just with human intervention. The scanning of all those properties and things like that is super interesting example. I just went dark. Oh, that's good. I also want to note that, in fact, your office is one of the very few privileged offices to actually have a data professional with you. And if we have time later, I will ask you about how that impacts your ability to make these transitions and things, because I think it's an important part. But we'll save that until a little bit later. And I think what I'd like to do next is go over to Amy. So Amy's going to talk about how the ecosystem is developing and what are our future goals. And so if you don't mind, I'll start with a very broad questions. Just can you share with us how the hub sees the future broader data and information innovation ecosystem, our role and how we see that playing out?
I can indeed, and thanks again. It's been such a great discussion. I always love these moments where we kind of out of the weeds of working and back to reflecting at how far we've come, and it's actually just amazing to see this. Okay, I'm also going to lean on what Lizelle did as well and have a few slides over here as well. So obviously, we're looking at all this data and some of the digital opportunities that we have, frontier technology, AI, so many tools, so many things to do, a whole suite of lighthouse projects to do what George had mentioned, not boil the ocean, because we cannot do all of this alone. And human rights violations, abuses, and protections are everyone's responsibility. And that's a reminder where we have this amazing power as UN human rights. It's a convening power to bring people together. And so really, when we are looking to the future of what we would like to do in terms of innovation at UN human rights, it's to look at the situation, which is very difficult, and increasingly there are just so many global human rights crises emerging, alongside all this incredible opportunity around innovative thinking, and innovation doesn't equal tech all the time. It's also about thinking differently, doing things differently. Our behavioral science colleagues were speaking yesterday on Behavioral Science Day about theories of change and how we can do things differently. And looking at how we can leverage a partnership ecosystem that works for us in an increasingly complex, difficult funding environment, and an increasingly complex digital environment, privacy environment, new and emerging threats that cannot yet be seen and anticipated that we have to prepare for. And then also just actualizing our vision and the High Commissioner's vision and bringing it to life and actually delivering on some of the innovations that are in our basket that Lizelle has spoken to. And so really it comes down to two critical things as well. It's money and meaning, people partnerships, and the funding that can bring some of this to life. And that is what I'm going to share a little bit about today. And as a South African, I'm always thinking in African proverbs because we grew up on them. And one of my favorites is, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. And this is really the fundamental baseline of what we're trying to do as we move forward as an innovation hub, as an office, as a human rights ecosystem, trying to figure out how we can go together and to do things properly. And this is all based on the fact that, our partnership and funding strategy, we are very cognizant, unfolds against this incredible backdrop of change, of uncertainty and unpredictability on all fronts. But actually, we see this as an opportunity, and thinking about donors and partners in new and distinctive ways, different to the way we've done it before. Those traditional manual methods also sometimes apply to our thinking about who we go to for funding. And anyone who's been watching the funding environment will know that it's changing. And to do this, to counter negative trends and provide hope, we can embrace an innovative way of thinking about how we partner and how we do things a little bit differently. And so the fundamental basis of where we are here is it's messaging. We know that human rights, our ecosystem, our office, ourselves, needs innovation, but also that innovation in all its shapes and forms needs a human-centered lens. It needs human rights at the heart of it. And how we marshal and broker new funding and partnership channels in this context is critical for our survival, but also for another 75 years of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so we've been working hard, if you haven't seen already, from what my colleagues have shown over the past almost a year. Next week, we are 1 year old in the hub to establish these kind of breakthrough early partnerships and funding avenues. And a lot of them are based on good tech partnerships, good innovation partnerships, people that want to work with us and embrace new ways of doing things and break out of these traditional modes to unlock the support for innovation data, digital, and statistics. So really we see innovation as a lever and a magnet for attracting new types of investments in human rights work. And we want to use its pull power. There's a magnetism around innovation that we just cannot ignore. And to do so, we're focusing on 4 areas. We're trying to expand our traditional donor and partner base. We're trying to maximize grants and goodwill ecosystem of support. We're also turning to talent, and talent is a big part of the quintets of change, and asking partners, the UN ecosystem, UN volunteers, interns, and there are a couple of good interns in the room today, to come and be part of this mission, bring talents and ideas and innovative thinking into our office and the human rights ecosystem. And then the final thing is to provide a vehicle through which people can partner. And this is often sometimes a missing link in partnerships models, that people get excited about doing something under a banner of something. And that's the 30 by 30 by 30 initiative, which I think I'm just going to stop and tell you a little bit more about now, because it's such a critical part of our work. But just to say on the other points is that we've engaged already over 50 potential donors and partners who want to work with us across member states, foundations, civil society, academia. We're working with the likes of Monash University to bring in data pipelines to make some of our products and ideas work, and other international organizations, including the World Bank. We're taking a lot of grant opportunities and partnering with as many other UN agencies, NGOs, to actually work on grants and to spend that time of going together instead of going alone, and figuring out joint solutions to these complex problems that we face. And of course, working with the incredible talent as we go. And we invite all kinds of talent to keep on it with us. If you're in the room and you want to be part of it, ping us. We're very, very interested. And so, yeah, the 30 by 30 by 30 initiative is an initiative that does this. It represents a bold vision for advancing human rights through innovation, and it seeks to use tech, data, and collaboration to address the complex challenges that we face and to safeguard rights. And so the initiative aims to build 30 human rights innovations for 30 communities by 2030, aligned with the 30 articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So we have a very kind of solid 3 by 3 by 3, a nice square or circle over there. Our moonshot really is to try and mobilize a fund of around $30 million annually for these innovation projects, which the hub will co-facilitate and manage with partners and experts from across our offices, field offices like Ukraine, where the work is actually being done. So how does this work? 30 by 30. It endorses the High Commissioner's mission to be a trusted partner and leading authority advancing human rights for everyone, everywhere. And it addresses this why now issue, because human rights need innovation and innovation needs human rights. And basically, it levers the power of partnership to deliver these innovations. And the goal is to bring together a mixture of countries, companies, and communities to deliver 30 innovations over the next 5 or 6 years. These countries, companies, and communities would co-design, co-create, and co-contribute, co-deploy these tools. And really here we want to have partnership-based engagement. So matching countries from the global north and the global south to unite with big companies and small companies, and then this whole massive community of foundations, civil society, NGOs, academia, and the UN community to provide a mix of resources that will help us deliver these innovations. So cash is the obvious kind, and money obviously helps you go a little bit further. But so do in-kind contributions, data, pipelines, software, infrastructure, talent and expertise, advocacy, networks. All of this really works to unlock the power of these innovations. And already my colleagues will have seen, like, we're having a lot of conversations. People are excited to actually jump on board the innovation. So it works like this. Project by project, innovation by innovation, we'll build and scale an ecosystem of human rights innovations. Some of them based on what we need to do, which George and Lizelle have shown already. We've already identified these. And some emerging from the marketplace, from communities, people that are experiencing human rights abuses. So yeah, the goal really is to try and find partners to bring ideas to this innovation circle, and to work together and to help us actualize the ideas that we have already. Libra is one of them, which Lizelle is taking you through already, but we have several others. We've got a civic space pulse that we want to scale. We have a project that's already funded by the UN Complex Risk Analytics Fund called on automating pipelines. As Ole was saying, like, automation has huge power. And we really need to leverage the power of open source. And so we're working with this. We've got a hackathon coming up in Japan on the sidelines of the Osaka World Expo, which focuses on human rights abuses, or protecting human rights in the face of man-made and natural disasters, and coming up with amazing solutions that protect the most vulnerable. And all of this builds to our goal of having a human rights data exchange, similar to the humanitarian data exchange. And we've got a lot of space to accommodate you here. If you're a country, a company, or community, or a beneficiary, we're open to hearing what your story is, because we want you to join the circle so that we can build scalable solutions together.
All right, thank you very much, Amy. Thank you very much for that broad overview. It's there's so much going on in this space, and I actually, as a new member of the hub, I'm still absorbing all the different areas of work that we have going on. I'm very mindful of the time, so let's go ahead and start asking some of the questions. We have two questions that were contributed by the participants. One is very straightforward, and it says from Eric. Eric was saying, "Hey, this is very interesting, but can you tell us, when are you planning to launch these projects?" For instance, they're referring to Libra and the Civic Space Monitor.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you, Eric, for the question. So these things are not sort of a quick, low-hanging fruit project, basically, in my mind. So it takes a few stages of just discovery in terms of getting the various pieces, the baseline fundamentals right, in infrastructure, in ensuring the currently siloed information ecosystem that is solved as well in hand, but also looking at sort of the use case curation a little bit more further in terms of who would benefit from what sort of functions we tied to the data exchange, or sort of the AI tool, the Libra AI tool, right? Because when we open it up to external sort of stakeholders, obviously there's one about risk, but also in terms of driving value, there are so many broad groups. So there's a design phase that's more where we go through, which we're going through right now, in terms of sort of trying to get closer to perhaps, again, what are the shapes and things that we need in place that long term it doesn't come off as another tool in a sea of tools that has a shelf life is very, very short, basically. It's more sustainable. Now, the sustainability also in current situation is about ensuring there's sufficient funding models in place, so that really dictates a lot of the choices, basically, right? It takes a little bit of time to bring in the partners, bring in the resources, and bring in the long-term sort of sustainability funding model to support these large projects. And beyond that, there are technical complexities, internal ICT sort of policies that we need to jump hoops, navigate, but also sort of also change them in some cases where it no longer is sort of reflecting sort of the needs of today. So yeah, there are all these hoops. So yeah, I don't have a single word answer for you, but I guess we're doing the best we can to move at speed. I would say by September, we would have some initial MVP sort of outputs of some of the
Minimal
things that we're
viable
looking
product.
at. Exactly. So that's sort of our approach, is not boil the ocean, do 3 countries at the ground level, 1 region, and perhaps some functionalities tied to some high priority key data sets. And within that, we're looking at working with our stats team to look at some of our core mandates where there's a global value add, and perhaps iterate from there, which would need different types of discussions based on inputs, outputs, and so on, right? Let me just stop there. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. And we have 9 minutes left. I'm going to get George with one quick one here that Shyla has asked, and because I know, George, you have to jump off and do another session. So please, as briefly as you can, what has surprised you most on this innovation journey so far? And how does that shape your vision in your role as the head of the unit for the data solutions?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mark, and thanks, Shyla, for that question. I don't know if it's a surprise, but certainly a mindset shift that has happened since the hub was launched was around digital and data as an enabler of partnerships, as an enabler of new models of collaboration. I think Zal touched on this a little bit in his presentation earlier around the way you can bring different partners together through data exchange, and then that enables us a quicker coordination across a network of actors than perhaps ad hoc analyst-driven exchanges on a particular event or case might realize. And that really aligns with the High Commissioner's point around being a trusted partner. And so yeah, for me, it's that mindset shift. It's using digital and data in a much more creative way to better connect the human rights ecosystem, to integrate data in a way that enables the ecosystem to become even more of a platform. Of course, the human rights mechanisms are a fantastic platform, but really building a much more robust data layer around that then facilitates greater efficiencies, the kind of impacts that Ole was talking about, more real-time monitoring or near real-time monitoring, more profound analysis, much better visualization and presentation of that information. For me, that change, that mindset shift has been quite profound, and something I've reflected on a few times since the creation of the hub. And then the second part of your question around, okay, well, how does that shape things going forward? I mean, you heard from Luzal, the talk of Civic Space Pulse, bringing together different data partners around detention of human rights defenders, enriching that with information available from open sources. I mean, that's one area of human rights work. So that type of approach, it may be possible to apply to many other thematic areas of human rights, and so that has been a key takeaway for me. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share that. Mark, back to you.
That's great. It is quite magical to see. It's not an easy transition. Change is hard, and this transformation takes effort. And every one of us has to act as an agent of change. And you can see that change taking place in real time. So that is a wonderful example. Okay, we have another question. I have very little time. So what I would like to do is I will actually, because I don't want to miss the chance to ask Oleg a question because he's calling us from Kiev. And so I think that's incredibly valuable. So what I'm going to do is just say thank you to everyone who has joined. We're going to keep going for a little while, but I just want to say thank you for your participation. Thank you for your interest, and stay tuned because we are doing new and exciting things every day. We want to make sure that everything we do is focused on delivering the vision of the High Commissioner to help those of you in the field working in human rights. We want to help you do what you do as effectively and efficiently as possible. And so that's what we're here for. That's why we're trying to make this effort. And Ole can tell us whether we're doing a good job or not, because he's actually out there. Masoud, I would like to ask Ole a question, and then I'll ask your question, okay? Ole, I had the opportunity to visit Kiev in, I think, 2019, and did a bit of with a colleague of mine, we did a data stock taking. And what you describe is very interesting to me, and that is the fact that data has become a tool that helps you break through and lead to more collaboration. And it was a huge issue where we saw there was great siloed workflows and things like that at that time. And so it's very rich for me to hear you say that data is actually the glue that's bringing the pieces together. And so I'd love to hear some more about that.
Thanks, Mark. I would actually correct you a little bit. It's not the data, it's the platform. It's the platforms that we're using, because the data we had the data back then as well, but it was siloed. And every portfolio had their own sort of systems, and they were doing a good job at keeping track of it, but we were really losing out on the more profound analysis. And it also was very hard, because when one staff member was away, it meant that the portfolio that person was in charge of, it was difficult to access that information. Now, with this sort of joint system, we can work much more collaboratively on it. We have all access to it. There's a much greater institutional memory being built up over time through this system, coming back to issues that I talked about in terms of storage, data security, etc.
That's magic. Thank you very much. Okay, we actually have 3 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and ask Masoud's question. I'm going to ask it to anyone who wants to come in, any of the panelists who wants to answer it. Masoud asks, given the increasing role of data and technology in advancing human rights, how can professionals from interdisciplinary fields, such as sustainable design, digital transformation, systems innovation, how can they contribute to the UN human rights agenda? Specifically, what are the key areas their expertise in technology for social impact and human-centered design can bring added value to organizations like OHCHR and the broader human rights ecosystem? Who wants to answer that?
I can take a first stab at it.
Please do.
That would have many facets of answers, but perhaps the most striking one that comes to sort of immediately is as an organizational strategy for data and how we apply it, but also how it impacts the work of the organization, right? So if you look at the SG's data strategy, it says, so our future is towards a more interdisciplinary, cross-functional team. Yeah. So that already sort of give you where we're headed towards. And that, I think, reflects, and which I agree, the reality of the world that we operate, which is a multidimensional, the challenges are not in a single direction. There's compounding effects of many things going on, right? So you can't solve problems that are multidimensional with a unidirectional lens. So I think that makes sense, and we need to organize ourselves that way as well, right? So hopefully, that gives you some positivity. But at the same time, I think in terms of gaps, if you think about as a pillar where we are, I don't want to compare, but but also I think the demand in the world, especially now, where as a voice for human rights, increasingly with sort of that demand that we actually need to have a voice, I think it requires a collective effort across profiles, across many things, right? So that would, again, I think a joint up approach, I think what Mark and George mentioned, across projects at the project scale, at the organization scale, I mean, that's the way to go, right? And sort of that's how we're organized, more thinking of ecosystems rather than, which is interdisciplinary, yeah, rather than sort of a solo act, basically, to tackle these large problems. Thanks.
Mark, if you
Right.
wanted me to add
Please.
to that as well, I think, we've I see ourselves as, at the start of this process very much, and there are many, many things that we want to do, and we have quite a few lessons that we've learned already. One of them is what you mentioned or alluded to earlier, that we have been in a privileged position of having a dedicated information management officer. And that has been absolutely key for us to be able to sort of drive this forward and actually implement some of our ambitions. We see that the human rights officers, they are busy with sort of responding to incoming tasks and the monitoring and the reporting and etc. And having people who can actually focus and support us on building some of these systems is important. So the information management officer has been key to us, and as we move forward, I can imagine that other sort of specialities, people with other types of expertise as well, could be helpful as we become even more advanced.
Excellent. Yeah, it's an interesting balance between bringing in the expertise and also raising the data literacy capacity of everybody in the organization. Those things have to happen in parallel. And so that's a great thing. So look, let me just say again, thank you very much, everybody. We have reached the end of our time limit. We're 1 minute over, so I don't feel terrible about that. I wanted to offer the opportunity for anybody who has one last thing they'd like to share before we go from any of the panelists. I know George had to jump off already. Okay. Look,
Thank you, Mark.
Oh,
thanks,
thank you
everyone.
all for joining. Thanks, Ole, for joining.
Thank
Kiet,
you.
thank you, Amy, for all your sharing all this, the ecosystem. And yeah, let's keep this open and let's keep talking, because there's a lot of things to talk about and a lot of changes on the way.
Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
Bye.